Hi, everyone. I'm Christy Galley, U.S. Marketing Manager here at Kids and Company, and I'm very excited to host our second Kidco Talk of the year. I want to welcome our brain power expert, Dr. Cassandra Chapman. Hello and welcome, Cassandra. Brain Power offers an after-school enrichment program that caters to the needs of high-achieving students. Their vision is to create the ideal learning environment in which bright students can thrive. We are going to hit a lot of great information and tips today about incorporating literacy-based activities for your child to begin their love for reading, the benefits that early literacy has for your child's success, and my most personal favorite, since I am a single mom of two, how to incorporate it and build it into your routine so it doesn't take extra time. Webinar participants, if you have any questions throughout this session, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to address your questions during our live Q&A. So, Cassandra, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was a great introduction. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. All right, so thank you so much for having me. This is the second webinar I've done with Kids and Company, but last year I did a very different topic. So this topic is really dear to my heart. I'm going to provide a few tips about how you can foster a lifelong love of reading, which is something I love to read. I love to read to my own kids, and I love when I see my students reading. So I hope I can give you some tips, whether your child is an infant or they're a toddler, preschooler, school age. I think we can always find more ways to incorporate daily literacy activities. And I know we're all really busy parents and caregivers. So I hope that I'll give you some tips and tricks to make that an easy transition. Okay, and yes, please feel free to type any questions in the chat, and hopefully we'll have time to get to all of those later. So yes, this is me. Thank you so much, Christy, for that lovely introduction. I work for Brain Power. I am a headmaster. I'm based in Ontario, Canada, and I organize one of our campuses, manages a couple of our campuses in Ontario. I'm also an instructor at Brain Power, where we teach high potential children, and I've taught kids from grades 1 and up. Okay. So let's get started. I'm actually going to introduce a few polls today. So you might see them all pop up at once, but I'll give you some prompts about when you can respond to those polls. So let's see if I can make that happen. Okay. Okay. So you should see that first poll pop up. Just curious about the age of your children. So my child is blank years old, and you'll see a few options pop up on the poll function. 0 to 12 months, 1 to 3, 4 to 5, etc. Okay, I see some responses coming in. I'll give you a minute just so we can see the ages for the participants that are attending live.
Lots of 1 to 3-year-old parents.
Amazing. Yes, I can see we have quite a few. Okay, no, so we're getting some more division there. Okay,
Yeah.
lots of 1 to 3-year-old parents, a couple, followed by 0 to 12 months, some infants, and then some older children as well. Okay, welcome. I think we have tips for everybody, so not to worry, but good to know the audience's age groups of interest. Okay, the second poll that you'll see pop up, which I see some of you have already responded to, at what age should literacy be introduced to your child? So you'll see that for question number 2. Do you think under the age of 1, toddler years, preschool years, or when they enter school? When should we be beginning to introduce some literacy activities? I think everybody has already responded, which is great. I love the active participation. So it looks like, yeah, a majority of you are saying under the age of 1, and then some toddler years. Absolutely. There's, we're going to talk about this, but it's never too early. We can always introduce literacy-based activities from a really early age. And then you'll also see number 3, a true or false question. Literacy skills are only gained through books. Do you think that is true or false? Okay, majority of our participants are saying false. Okay, amazing. I hope we'll learn some things today. And then something I'm interested in learning more about your goals. I feel like some days it is hard to build in daily literacy activities with my child. This is question number 4. And of course, there's no right or wrong answer. Do you find that sometimes it can be hard to build in those daily activities? True or false? Okay, it looks like a lot of our attendees are saying true. Sometimes it can be hard to do that, right? When our days are already pretty jam-packed. Absolutely. Okay, I hope I'll be able to give you some tips and tricks to make that a little bit easier. So yeah, I think that building in literacy-based activities doesn't actually need to be that time-consuming or inconvenient. Certainly, we don't need any more inconvenience. Today, we're going to learn a few tips and tricks to help your child really develop that love of reading. And I'm going to give you some suggestions about some things you can do that are really part of your daily routine. You might need to adjust it a little bit based on your routine, but I'll give you some suggestions, and then we'll have lots of time for questions at the end. Okay, so there's some bite-sized information here. There's going to be 5 tips, and I'll summarize them at the end as well. So the first tip is to expose your child to literacy in really everyday activities. So as you were voting there, literacy is not only gained through books. There are lots and lots of different ways to build in those literacy activities. So I would really encourage you to try to build in literacy into your daily routine. So some examples that I can think about, do you drive your child to school or to childcare? Or to an activity of some sort. Maybe one way you could start building in some literacy-based activities would be to point out road signs on your way to school, or different signs, right, that you might see. Maybe even, there'll be big billboards depending on where you live, right? You could already start building in some literacy-based activities by pointing out some of those signs, for example. Perhaps at the beginning, you're pointing out various shapes, right? Various colors. And then eventually, as they get older and they start learning their letters, right? Start learning their numbers, for example, you can build in some of that literacy and numeracy-based activities. This could even work well if you walk, right? If you walk or take the train, or depending again on where you live, right? There's lots of different ways to do that on your drive to your destination. One thing that I really love doing with my own kids is we love baking in our household. And I've been doing this with my kids since they were really small. We use cookbooks. So I know it's really easy to, or even an iPad or some sort of tablet, you could look up the recipes, right? We look through the recipes together. And as they are getting older, we've been pointing out the ingredients, right? Pointing out the various lines in the recipe, right? That's literacy. They're reading, they're learning how to identify various letters, various numbers, right? And the importance of following direction. That's been something that we've really enjoyed doing as a family. Do you visit the park regularly, right? Again, similarly to the drive to school or to childcare, you could, again, look for different colors and shapes and letters and numbers at the park, right? There are various signs, various colors, various shapes, right? Building in those activities and doing something that you're already doing anyway, and something that you're enjoying to do as a family. Really, really easy way to get your child interested in pointing out various things that will hopefully lead to some strong literacy skills as they get older. Okay, second tip is to really read to your child every day from infanthood. So making reading and literature an important part of your everyday routine. So this could be bedtime stories, which is something I think a lot of families do, but it doesn't have to be bedtime stories, right? Perhaps that's not great for your routine. That's okay. You could certainly build in reading at a different time of day. It doesn't only have to be at bedtime. but really introducing books every day as much as possible into your routine. This will help with vocabulary. This will help with them being able to tell a narrative, them being able to understand a narrative, them being able to do reading comprehension eventually, right, is going to be really, really important. And it even helps with grammar, right? So the more that a child reads as they get older, of course, when they're infants, you are reading to them, but you're exposing them to lots and lots of words that they might not have been exposed to otherwise. So the research shows that, the more that we read, the more vocabulary they're exposed to, right? Because you're reading maybe words that you might not be using every day. So this can start with board books, right? When they're infants, eventually can lead to picture books. And then by the time they're, school aged, they might be reading some of those early readers, and then chapter books, right? And hopefully we've instilled this real love of reading. So they're going to choose the book over something else. Okay. So I have a question for you. This is question 5 on the polls. Okay, I think most of you have already responded. If you haven't, please go ahead if you would like to do so. We have books, different types, in visible places around our house. Is that true or false? So in your house, think to your common areas like your family room, your living room. Do you have books in various places around your house? Could be on a bookshelf, could be on a table, somewhere that is accessible to your child. Okay. Okay, looks like the majority of you have said true. That's wonderful. The research shows that this makes a huge difference in literacy skills later in life. So, it's not too late, right? You can still add books, and make them decorative if you want. They don't have to be, of course, but really having books around your house plays an important role. Make sure that the books are accessible to your child. So, having them in the common area, but, if they're too far for the child to reach, that's not going to be as good as if the child could pick it up themselves and look through the book, turn the pages. So maybe having books visibly on coffee tables or bookshelves or side tables and other common areas in your home. That is great. So absolutely, for sure, having books in your child's room plays an important role so they can access their own literature, but also having them in the area where you spend time as a family is really, really important. So if the book is available and if it's accessible, the child is going to be more likely to pick it up, right? They may not be able to read it right away, but if they get used to flipping the pages and looking through the pictures, looking through the various, text and whatnot, keeping it at their eye level is going to be really, really important. And like I said, the research out there does show that this will make reading more accessible, right? And encouraging them to choose the book, right? Instead of doing maybe something else. Okay. Tip number 4 is to visit the library. So libraries are amazing resources. They have so many activities, especially nowadays. Super awesome. Start really early, making the library part of your routine. So depending on your area, this might be a little bit different, but I know that our local library had like Mother Goose activities when my kids were infants, for example, where we would go to the library every week, and we made it really part of our routine. Started off as Mother Goose was an activity where we would be with other parents and other babies. We would sing songs. But then eventually it led into, my kids got older. We would go look in the various sections of the book of books and different sections of the library and take books home. We made that part of our routine, which was a lot of fun. So they got their own library card and they were able to take out their own books and whatnot. And I think it's just amazing some of the activities that the libraries offer now for even for older kids, right? So of course your child's interests are going to change, as they get older, but there are so many activities for them to explore at the library. So I saw recently some ads for 3D printing activities. There was like a workshop where they could go and learn how to record a podcast, and there were video game tournaments. I think just having these activities in the library where they're surrounded by books and magazines and other media is really, really important, and a great way to get your kids to still be, picking literacy even as they get older. Okay. Tip number five is to really cater to your child's interests. So this is a question I often get from parents in Brain Power. So their child was really interested in reading, and then, more recently, they're not reading as much. What can we do to support that? So, my advice is that your child is going to be much more likely to pick up a book if they are interested in the subject matter. So if the literacy activities are interesting to them, they're much more likely to read about it. This might require changing up your at-home library quite often. So, especially as they get older, their interests might change rapidly, but there are lots and lots of possibilities. So, some children are not as interested in fiction. That's okay. Maybe they're really interested in space. Why not go to the library and look up some books or find some books about space? Take those home, and if they're really, really interested, perhaps you would like to purchase them for your at-home library. If not, the library is a great resource for you to continue to check out those books, right? Are they really interested in animals, right? Absolutely. Go to the library or find some literature on that. If they're really, really interested in video games, okay, that's okay. That's great. There are also books about video games, right? Maybe they want to learn about the development of video games. That would be a great way to cater to their interest, but also to get them reading. And in terms of fiction, sometimes we haven't just found the right type of fiction, right? Maybe we need to expose them to, maybe they're really interested in fantasy, maybe they're interested in science fiction. Just finding sometimes the right style, the right genre is going to get them really, really interested. What I generally find as well is once they've found an author that they like, once they've found a series that they like, there are so many great series nowadays. They're much more likely to continue reading once they become really invested in particular characters. Some other possibilities, there are really, really great magazine subscriptions out there. They will love receiving that subscription in the mail each month. They have various ages, starting as young as preschool age, where, of course, the literacy activities are going to be a lot of fun. And then as they get older, you can change that up. There are book clubs out there where kids can get together with other kids their own age to discuss a book. This is something that we've been doing at Brain Power, and the kids love it. It's so great. They read the book and then they get together and they talk about it. And we often actually have the author come if they're a local author, which has been something that they've been really enjoying. You could enroll in when they're school age, an after school program like ours, like Brain Power, where your child will be exposed to different types of literature and work with like-minded peers. So like I mentioned earlier, sometimes it's just about finding the right type of literature, and really getting them interested in reading. And I mean, you will have set up the stage from infanthood, right, with those books around your home, with reading to them every day. Just getting them to now want to do it on their own is really, really important. Another fun thing, which will also help with writing, is to find a pen pal and write letters each month or so. So this is a great way to introduce introduce literacy activities into your monthly routine. The letters will take a little bit of time to write, especially at the beginning, but they will love getting mail from their new friend. This is a great way to also get them writing, which is something else I often get questions about. How do we get our kids to write, right? How do we get those activities going? This would be a really, really fun way to do that, because they would be writing to someone their own age, right? And getting some nice snail mail, as they say. I mean, you can also do this via email if you wish, but sometimes getting that hard copy mail from the mailbox is really, really special. Same thing with the book club, right? We can also, integrate some writing activities there as well, because writing is really, really important. I think it's also always really, really good to emphasize that the more literature we're exposed to, the more that we read, that will have an effect, like I already mentioned, on our vocabulary, on our grammar, and on our writing. It does play a really, really important role in all areas of English or whichever language you are studying. Okay, so based on those tips, and we're going to have a lot of time for some Q&A, and I'll also share a couple more ideas. Do you feel, I hope you feel a little bit more equipped to help your child develop a love of reading? So there's a poll question about that, number 6. And it's never too late, right, to integrate more literacy activities. But really, it's really important to make it fun. So I try to do this in my own home, and I do this with my students as well. The more we make it fun, right, and the more we make it really part of a routine, it will become a lot more naturally. Oops. So just to summarize those 5 tips, and then I'll share a few more things. So the first tip was to expose your child to literacy in everyday activities. And again, this will depend on your own life and the type of activities you do every day. But try to think about ways to do that, whether it's cooking, baking, driving to school. Can you look for road signs, right? Can they read instructions? Can you maybe set something up in your home as well? One idea would be to set up, if you're trying to build in some routines for getting ready in the morning, maybe you can set that up as a sign in your child's bedroom or in a common area. And that's also integrating some literacy activities. Reading to your child every day at a time that is convenient for you. So if that's bedtime, great. If it's morning when you wake up, great, right? But finding ways to read to your child every day, age appropriately. Having books around our house, right, in common areas where we can see them, where the child can see them, so they're not super high, right? They're accessible to them, and hopefully they're also about I said cater to your child's interest. This is another way we could certainly cater to our kids' interest, right? Having, are they really interested in frogs? Having some frog books, lying around, so they're gonna pick those up and look at them. Or dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are always popular. Visit the library, right? Make that part of one of your activities that you do. You don't have to do it every week, maybe once a month or something like that. And then cater to your child's interest, right? So you want them to read more. Can you try to find some books that they're going to be interested in, right? And there are various ways to do this, but I think it's a really, really good way to introduce literacy. And to show that you're aware of their interests, right? And they're just much more likely to pick up the book and read it, or to show interest in it, right? To keep their attention span, if that's something of interest to them. So one thing I could mention as well is, I work for Brain Power Enrichment Programs. We are based in Canada, but we also have virtual programming. How can we support your child's literacy skills? Well, lots of ways. But we have a few programs that we're running this summer, actually. So we have language arts. Like I said, we started in grade 1. We have a language arts program where we teach vocabulary, grammar, reading, writing, and spelling for our young learners, our primary learners in grades 1 and 2. We focus on spelling. We have a math and problem solving program where we do a lot of brain teasers and logic puzzles and word problems, where of course literacy is of utmost importance. And we also have a public speaking program which starts in grade 4. And in that program we teach students about the art of persuasion. And we get them to write their own speeches. So our grade fours write their own speeches and deliver them. In our workshop, for example, they deliver their speeches in week 4, which is remarkable. I'm always so impressed by what they're able to do, and they do their own research. In addition, we do lots of field trips and community experiences that are built around what we're doing in our classroom. And those are primarily literacy-based activities. So there is a discount code here for Kids and Companies families, and we'll send that out a little bit later as well for some of our summer programs. So just for fun, I thought I'd throw in some pictures about some activities that have been literacy based that we have done recently. So what you can see on the left-hand side, this is a book club we ran at our Oakville, Ontario location, where we had the author of a book called Music for Tigers, Michelle Katarusman. She came in September. The kids had all read the book already. So they're older kids, grades 3 and up. They had read the book, and Michelle came in and talked about the book and signed their books, which they loved, and they were able to ask her questions about her writing process, and just talk about how she came up with the story. And it was amazing to see how interested they were in the narrative and the reading comprehension. And that was really, really nice to see. And then this picture you see on the right-hand side, this was from a play we went to see, a puppet show called Emilio's Emilian Chameleons. This was for grades 1 and up, so for some of our younger learners, and we went and saw the show. Which was really, really fun and really entertaining. And then we actually did a debrief after the show with a frog expert from McMaster University, a university in Hamilton, Ontario. And it was amazing. The kids were really, really into it. They learned about camouflage. They were able to do their own coloring activity. And it was just great to see. So that's another literacy-based activity, theater, right? Are your children interested in theater, right? That is another great way to build in some literacy, right? Can they follow the story? You can spend some time debriefing after the show, like what happened in the show, to make sure that they've understood it. They're able to follow the narrative. So those you can see some of those shows from a really young age as well. Okay, so I see we have some questions. So I'll say thank you. I'd be happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Cassandra. Thank you so much for those tips. They were clean, concise. Like as a mom myself, I followed them like, okay, that's easy. I can do it. I can incorporate it. So thank you so much for that. Yes, I was getting nervous because I was like, oh my gosh, you've answered everyone's questions. We have nothing, but now we have a bunch coming in. So let's get started. Somebody asked, what's the minimum age that you can enroll kids in Brain Power?
Oh, okay. Our minimum age is usually age 6. So we start in grade 1. So I mean, some students start grade 1 at the age of 5, but they're turning 6. So the year that they turn 6, we do a assessment for our learners. So the assessment is like a little interview where we just kind of see where they're at and how they're doing. So for the language arts, for example, we would assess their reading, we would assess their vocabulary, some of their grammar, and some of their spelling to make sure that it's a good fit for them. We'd recommend a program, but yeah, we start in grade 1.
Great, thank you. Another question, what are some good resources for parents to learn how to teach reading, particularly phonics rather than memorization or sight words?
Oh, some good resources for teaching reading. That's a great question. So I know reading has been a huge topic in mainstream media lately, and in around all over the place. I've been seeing lots and lots about that. So I would. In this case, like we don't teach reading at Brain Power. Our students already can read when they join our programs at the age of 6. But primarily this is taught in kindergarten. So I can certainly send some resources about how to do that. So maybe I can do that in the follow-up email that we typically send after the webinar. But certainly getting your child, they do need to memorize some of the words because especially with English, right? The way that we spell certain words is not always helpful. English is pretty notorious for that. But getting them to when they're beginning to learn their letters, that you're going to start with simple letters, right? But eventually getting them to learn the blends, right? So C and H in English makes the cha sound, for example. S and H makes the sh sound. So getting them to kind of sound things out is a great activity. I'm sure there'll be some support there with the classroom teachers as well. But it's certainly never too early to start pointing out letters, right? Even at a young age, getting them to learn their alphabet, right? And then you can build in some of those blends and some of the sight. So sometimes they're called sight words or popcorn words, right? Those really common words in English that tend to be exception words. Absolutely.
Great, thank you. Um, well, this is a good one, I thought, because I was like, this kind of reminds me of me. She said, apologize if you've already answered this. It's definitely a good idea for parents to read as well as to show reading is done by everyone. However, I use a Kindle to read, not a physical book. Is this bad? Should I be investing in physical books for a few years?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, Kindles have become really, really popular. I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think if your child knows that you're reading, that you're building in those literacy-based activities, like on your, we didn't really talk about this,
Yeah.
but also showing that you're like the parents, the caregivers are also reading, right? That's an activity that they're doing, and that's a great way to model behavior, right? So your child can see, oh, mom is reading right now. That's something I want to do as well. That's a great activity. I mean, I think as long as they know that you are reading, that's certainly not going to hurt. I think whether you use a Kindle or a physical book is just a personal preference. That's totally fine. And I mean, we didn't really talk too much about this either, but there are lots of electronic ways also of accessing literature for your kids, depending on what you want to do there. But there are some great apps out there as well to build that in that they're sometimes exposed to at school as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what made me think when you were talking about like the library and everything like that. Like I know, maybe there is not a library that's convenient or something like that. There is, that was one thing I was gonna bring up to you is if you knew any like online, because I know they almost have like online libraries. Was one of the things that my older son really enjoyed doing was going in and I think it was called Epic Books was an app that they used in grade school and he loved it because he could go in there and they could search by fiction, nonfiction, something they were interested in. So just like, is that like a resource that you recommend and are familiar with as well?
Yeah, I would say like any way to bring in literacy is a great activity. So yeah, depending on your library, your local library that you're able to access, they're going to each have probably their own resources available. But absolutely, like go in there and see what they have, what kind of resources they have, and yeah, there's lots and lots of ebooks out there as well. There's even like some resources where the book will be read to you. So if your child
Mhm.
is not yet reading, but they can follow along, right? So they can flip the pages on the screen, and then you don't have the time to read at that moment in time, right? Maybe this is a good activity to do before dinner, or something like
Yeah,
that.
that's what I
There's
was thinking too. I was like, you're at the table while you're cooking, like go ahead, flip, read a book, get your time in. So yeah, absolutely. It's all about multitasking sometimes.
it is for sure.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Another great question. It says, thanks for the great advice. My son likes to repeat the same books and stories over and over. Is there a recommended number of times to repeat a book before trying to introduce something else, or is it better to keep reading the same book until he's ready to move on? I think we
Kids
can all resonate with that.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Kids actually love love the repetition, right?
Mhm.
Same thing with songs, right? Like, I mean, that's something else, songs, right? Songs have their own stories as well, and that's another way to bring in some literacy. I mean, I would say if your child is enjoying the book, it certainly doesn't hurt to continue to read it. And they've also learned the story, right? Are they able to retell it back to you? That would be kind of a fun activity to do. Ask them, okay, what happened in this story, maybe you could talk about some of the characters. Like, is a character really happy? Why are they happy? Is a character maybe sad? Why are they sad? Right? That's another way to make sure that they're really following the story. I don't think there's like too many times to read
Yeah.
the story. I think it's best probably more that we're like, oh, I know this story so well. I've memorized it, right? And sometimes our kids have also memorized it, and they'll repeat it back to us. So that could be a fun activity, getting them to read it to you, right? Depending on their age,
Yeah.
they're probably not reading it, but are they able to tell the story back? That would be a great way to see if they're following along and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a really great idea. Start having them tell you, kind of flip it around a little bit, shake it up. I know Brown Bear was a huge in my house. I can quote it, I think, until the day that I pass. So, yeah, that was a favorite in our house. So
Another thing you could
definitely.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say another thing you could do is you could introduce some of these text to self connections or text to world connections or text to text connections from a really early age if they know a story really well. So, in case you're not familiar with this is an activity that we tend to introduce when they're in school. Can you make a connection from the text to yourself? Right? So if it's brown bear, can you relate to brown bear at all? Right? Of course, it's going to depend on the story,
Mhm.
but can they make a connection between the text and their own lives? Can they make a connection between the text and the world? Maybe something that's happened at school or at daycare. Can they make a connection between the text and another text? Right? So are there
Mhm.
two like bear stories that they really love to read? So since they know the story really well, even if they're really little, this could still be a great way to build in some of those connections, which is something they're going to be asked to do in school, right?
Mhm.
So if you're interested in that early, building those connections, reflecting, they probably won't see it that way yet, but you're really setting them up for success.
Oh, that's great. Toddler mom here. Are some types of books better than others for this age range? For example, real life photos versus cartoons, clear font, real words versus made up ones.
Oh, interesting. That's a great question. I would say, I would say the more variety at this age would be great. So if you're looking at storybooks with real pictures, that's great. You could also look at cartoon pictures. Certainly, nonsense words are fun. Getting them to kind of sound them out is fun. We can still generally try to figure out as a toddler, they're not going to be able to do this, but nonsense words, so made up words, still follow a lot of the structural requirements of a sentence, right? So you can only use a certain type of nonsense word in a noun position, and that sort of things. That's certainly not going to hurt. I would say, as your child gets older, you kind of want the books to grow with them. So introducing books that have more vocabulary, that they can follow, of course, is going to be important. I would say variety is great here. In terms of the font, I mean, the clearer the font is probably as you're trying to get them to identify the letters is going to be easier for them, right? If it's all written in cursive, that might be a little bit trickier for them. But again, here I would go with the child's interest. If they're willing to sit with you and read the whole book or read 5 books, like that's great.
Okay, great. There's a lot of questions on here, Cassandra, about like dual language homes.
Amazing.
Saying, is there a good time to introduce like second language, a bad time? Should you read more in English? So just like any,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a big question. So, yeah, I actually did all my studies in linguistics. So, this question is near and dear to my heart. But I don't think there's like ever a bad time to introduce a second or a third language. So, if you are a bilingual family, it's not going to hurt to introduce that second language. I mean, some families choose to speak both languages from birth, and that's totally fine. I mean, I think it's so dependent on your own situation, and how much time you have and that sort of thing. I mean, I think once they enter school, if you're going to an English speaking school, for example, they're going to be exposed to that English literature. So it certainly doesn't hurt to have, I mean, if they're infants or toddlers, you can certainly bring in both those languages and bring in literature from both languages. It kind of depends on how much exposure I think they're having to both languages. But the research shows that kids are like sponges at that age, at a young age, so they're going to pick up on whatever language they're exposed to. But yeah, certainly bringing in the literature, I would say if you can bring in books from both languages, that's not going to hurt. It's certainly going to be really, really helpful. Keeping in mind that when they go to school, right, depending on which languages we're referring to, like if they end up going to an English speaking school, then they won't be exposed to the other language in the same way in school. But yeah, I mean, kids learn that so easily. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another kind of more school age question. It says, when they are in school, is there a specific reading level that the teachers hope that they should be at? I know that each child is different, but should we be concerned if our child isn't at the expected reading level? Now, I know this kind of varies, like state to state or province to province, but just any kind of general information, maybe.
Yeah, I think each school board kind of does their own reading levels. There's
Mhm.
generally like like they're expected to know certain words, they're expected to know how to spell like certain like certain patterns, and that sort of thing, and certain reading levels. I would say in this case, without knowing the exact child, it's hard to say. But I would check in with the primary teacher, check in with the school teacher to make sure that they're doing as expected. And if I know at Brainpower what we do is we actually teach enrichment. So we're typically teaching, at a grade 1 level, we're reading books that are typically for grade 2 and 3. So we're challenging them a little bit to read at a little bit of a higher level. So my experience is primarily with those kids. But I would check in with the teacher, kind of thing. And sometimes what happens is maybe we're not giving them challenging enough books. So sometimes that happens, where they kind of get even I see this with older kids. Sometimes they get used to reading a certain style and they love it, and that's great. It's great that they're reading, but sometimes we need to challenge them a little bit more to read a different style of book, for example. Yeah,
Okay,
that's a good
great.
question. Mhm.
Another question. My child would rather sit in front of a screen than a book. What can I do to encourage more literacy? I
Oh goodness,
think we can all definitely resonate with that one.
screen time questions. Okay, so this is tricky, right? It depends on the age of the child, I think. But I mean, can we bring in some literacy activities on the screen, maybe as a transition? So we talked a little bit earlier about some of those ebooks, some of those resources through the library, for example. Can we bring in some of those activities? Even those read, like depending on the age, there's lots of read aloud books out there. So some of those are through the library. There's even some, like on YouTube, where teachers or other educators are reading aloud some books. That's another way to bring in some activity. I would want to know more about are they refusing to read books, or have we maybe not found the right book? So I talked earlier about making sure we're finding the right book, the right style, right? Like graphic novels are great. So I know there are pictures, there are comics, but there are really advanced graphic novels out there as well. Maybe try that, right? Trying to get them really, really interested so that hopefully they will choose the literacy based activity over something else. So yeah, trying again to really cater to their interests would be really key here.
Okay, great. think we have time for just a couple more. Thank you everyone for sending in your questions. Here's a good one. How can I inspire my child to read the classics? I know how important they are, and as they get older and more advanced academically.
The classics. Aha. Yes. Okay. Yeah, this is a really, really great question. I think it would depend on the age, right, of the child. But certainly we want them to be able to read those classic books. These tend to be the books that most people know about, right? They know the storyline, they know the narrative, they know the characters. So I think really getting that those literacy skills down from an early age, getting them really, really interested, will eventually encourage them to read those more advanced books. So those books tend to be a lot harder. Um, but those books tend to be the ones that they can refer to, right, when they are older in their university applications, or even in some of their high school applications, depending on the high school that they're interested in. Sometimes you have to write application essays, and those will really, really, really help them out, right? Because they can refer to some of those characters and that sort of thing. I mean, yeah, there are various ways to do this, but making sure that they kind of getting them interested in the storyline maybe before they actually pick up the book would be good. Maybe you can make this a fun activity. Maybe you can do it as a family. If they're, a high school student, for example, maybe, one of the parents or a caregiver can also read the book with them. Make it part of some sort of activity would be good. But yeah, hopefully that will come with time.
Yes, absolutely. And I know like a lot of like the classics too, I feel like there's a movie for them now a day. So it's all like I remember in high school, it's like, okay, let's get through the book and then like our prize is to watch the movie. So is that something that like you think kind of helps like almost like seeing theater and stuff like that? Like just
That's true.
again,
Yeah, that's a great point. So I can speak for in some of my classes at Brainpower, we recently finished some novel studies, and part of what we were doing was reading like a couple chapters every week, and then we were watching part of the movie
okay.
in class. So it was only like 5 minutes a week. So we would read, 5 chapters, we'd watch the part of the movie, but they really got excited about it, and it got them really looking forward to it. And they didn't want what we watched in class to spoil anything. So they were actually all doing the reading, which was great. And what I thought was interesting is they would point out, oh, hey, I didn't think the character would look like that.
Mhm.
Oh, hey, they made, like, how the movies always make a few differences, a few
Yeah.
changes. Like, hey, that didn't actually happen. They got it wrong. And that was really great. Like, they were picking up on, I thought, some really, really small, minor changes that they made for, Hollywood and that sort of thing. But it was great to see them so invested and so interested in that. So, absolutely, like if you can bring in other media, like why not?
Okay, great. I think we have one time, like a couple more. Someone's asking, is watching book stories on digital platform, is that okay? Any tips on how to encourage toddlers writing alphabets and sentences?
Okay, sounds like those are two separate questions.
Yes.
The first question was about getting toddlers to watch videos about.
I guess it's asking if like digital platform, like books, like online, which I know we kind of talked about, but maybe this is like a specific app they're
I think
questioning.
I mean, I think like, depending on how much, like, I know screen time is a big issue, a big question these days. I mean, I think like if it's going to get them to be interested in literature, and maybe also give you a few minutes to do something else, like by all means, right? Can they follow the story? I think what I would do there is maybe follow up after they have done, watch the video, whether 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or however long it is. Can you ask them, it depending on their age? Like, I mean, if they're not yet talking a lot, it might not work just yet. But as they get older, can they tell you what happened in the story? Can they tell you about a character? Right, getting them to retell you. This is just summary, but at a young age, like that's great. By all means, like that's a great way to make sure that they're also comprehending, which is something that pops up when they're older as well, right? Sometimes we read, but we don't fully understand what we have read. That's why we have reading comprehension questions. So absolutely, engaging in the activity with your child is great. So yeah, of course, they can certainly watch those, but I would try to find a way to interact with them afterwards to make sure that they have followed what happened. I think the other question was about writing, right?
Yeah, how any tips on encouraging toddlers for writing alphabets and sentences? So I guess just really just starting to kind of make
Yeah,
correlation maybe between like what they're seeing and then
yeah.
incorporating it into their doing.
Sure. So I think like toddlers can start writing letters. Absolutely. I would start with their name because getting them to identify the letters in their name, getting them to start writing those out. There are like some resources you can find online, or you can buy books where you can get them to start tracing letters. Eventually, they can write those. I mean, sentences I wouldn't expect
Yeah.
until they're a lot older.
Mhm.
In kindergarten is when they would start to build that sentence structure. And I mean, sometimes it's just small, but I think yeah, absolutely getting them to practice writing their letters out from a young age, and just being really, really encouraging would be helpful. But like I said, I would start with their name, or start with the letters of the people in their family. So, mom's name starts with this letter, and then just getting them to start identifying those. Like,
Mhm.
great, great way to introduce that.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I think we've answered about a good chunk of what everybody, so thank you so much for everybody who submitted. Thank you so much for the information you provided us today and all the resources and examples are super helpful. So thank you so much, Cassandra. We'd like to remind all participants that there will be a recording sent out following today's session, as well as a survey that'll be popping up when this talk ends. So if you wouldn't mind, take a couple minutes, provide us some feedback. We appreciate it. Thanks for everyone for joining, and I hope to see you guys next month. And Cassandra, thank you so much for your time and all of your information. It was very, very helpful. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to answer any other questions via email.
Yes, absolutely. We will send all the information out. So if you have any additional questions that you didn't get answered today, you can get Cassandra's information and send that all right over. All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.